That time I accidentally worked for the Russian mafia and proxy blew up a dumpster with bread dough. I'm a professional baker, and have worked for various companies developing recipes and the like. I found a job at a local grocery store, working super early mornings on their pastries for the day. There were usually a few other people there, one of whom was a mixer. Mixers typically follow a spec sheet with the weights of all the ingredients they need to batch mix. It's kind of mindless work and doesn't require much thought. He was a young guy, fresh out of his teens. We became fast coworker friends, and enjoyed chatting it up about baking, and I'd help him put our supply order away. Good times. One day, a woman with a thick Russian accent came in and handed us business cards. She told us whatever we're getting paid, her company would double it if we came to work for them. I scheduled an interview, thinking this would be a great opportunity for me. It was a new grocery store concept, like a glitzy glammy European-style Costco, whatever that means. When I went in for the interview, the place was literally still under construction. I met their lead baker and we hit it off right away. He warned me that the big boss had interesting tastes, and we'd need to work with that. No biggie. More money, let's go. They hired us both and, over the next several months, it was a really interesting and fun experience. The big boss, thick, burly Russian man, to the point and perpetually angry, wanted this place to be like Costco, mass production of quality pastries. They were bringing in crazy amounts of new equipment, including folders, shapers, and injectors that were easily worth millions. We didn't have much equipment to start, and we were doing a lot of mixing in trash cans. Remember my mixer buddy? Well, he was working on the bread dough, using spec sheets provided by our lead baker. Over time they were bringing on more staff, and it was a lot of fun developing new recipes, experimenting with ratios, and figuring out how to get over constraints for the types of products that boss wanted. Did I mention he was an asshole? Oh yeah. When he was reviewing some cheesecake I had made, he said, "Good job, sweetie." I came back with, "Miss, ma'am, or my name is fine." He scowled at me, and from that point on he treated me like garbage. We brought other women on staff. I watched him hit on them. Some of the others were cool with being sexually harassed, I guess. This place was paying top dollar and had to get in good with the big boss, right? So, the stage is set here. Boss quickly turned his business into a game of Survivor. He'd fire people on the spot for whatever reason. One day, one of the people he sacked was our lead baker. It came as a surprise since he was developing all the recipes we'd be using. I inherited a lot of his notes, and his development work was divided between me and the mixer. So, this whole time mixer was kissing Big Boss's ass pretty hard. He was seeing an open position with the lead baker gone, and quickly became invested in the idea of him running the bakery show and making some serious money. At the same time, my relationship with Big Boss was quickly declining. For an example, I had him sample some cinnamon rolls I had made, and he came back with, "I hate these, they're terrible." "What do you not like?" "We can change anything about them." "The dough? The filling? The icing? I don't know, I just don't like them." On a hunch, I gave some cinnamon rolls from the same batch to another lady there he had eyes for, and asked her if she'd present them to him as her own. She offered him the same product I had given him minutes before, and he loved it. Anyway, I noticed that my notes were out of place one day, and a coworker informed me my mixer buddy was stealing my work and presenting it as his own. He was also approaching me and asking a lot of baking questions, which was fine, but I knew that his knowledge of industrial ratio baking was mediocre at best. He was a mixer. Following a recipe is all he knew how to do. Knowing this, I made a decoy copy of my notes, but this time I put really, really awful recipes, with huge amounts of salt or yeast. Anyone who knew how to build a recipe could probably look at it and go, "Whoa, that's a lot." Not mixer buddy. My original plan was to leave this in an obvious spot as bait and let him steal the awful recipes, but Big Boss had other plans. We sat down for a pre-launch meeting and he informed me I wasn't going to be working in the bakery anymore, and being relegated to store setup. Mixer was going to be taking over as the lead baker. Guess all that ass-kissing really paid off. And I was to give him all my notes so far. No problem, boss. A day later was when the fun really began. Mixer mixed up a huge batch of super-ass salty cake batter, and I heard Big Boss screaming at him about way too much salt. That's not even where the fun begins. As we were setting up an industrial quantity baking equipment, we had to test the larger quantity mixing machines, and did a test run for some bread dough, with my decoy recipe that had triple the yeast and sugar. As it didn't come out right, Mixer had to throw it away. His choice? The dumpster out back in the dead heat of summer. Hundreds of pounds of dough. The fun thing about massive amounts of bread dough is that it doesn't magically stop rising if you throw it away, especially in a hot dumpster. A few hours later, I spied out back to see Mixer Buddy shoveling this massive blob of dough into trash bags that had exploded from the dumpster like an uncovered blender spewing out a yeast-laden smoothie. Here's a photo of what it looked like. It's not the original dumpster, but it should give you an idea of how awful it is. Sweet revenge. Now, about the mafia thing. This store was really strange. They had been ordering doubles of all the crazy industrial baking equipment and storing them in back. We had nowhere to put any of this. I also looked up the company they were subcontracted under, and it was to a dead address in Russia. Big Boss also had armed security guards everywhere. This was a grocery store, mind you. I had a feeling that this company was more of a front for laundering a bunch of money. I eventually was fired by Big Boss, which was great because I had been job hunting, full well knowing this business was a sinking ship. I had a new job lined up already. They had their grand opening, did business for 3 months, then closed. Rip Mixer. The whole business was a pretty nasty bait and switch. The environment was incredibly toxic as people were crawling over themselves to appease this monster, and it was easy to get fired for little to no reason. People were leaving established jobs to work here because they were offering a lot more pay. Around the time of the grand opening, they fired greater than 50% of the staff and rehired a bunch of people, presumably for way less pay. The store itself was bizarre. It had crystal chandeliers above weird curved shelving. Whoever was doing the product setup really had no clue what they were doing. We had laundry detergent next to spaghetti sauce. There was an in-store restaurant that flipped its menu around several times. It went from a fine dining menu concept to cold sandwiches and weird European salads. The armed guards stayed the whole time. Big Boss had a lot of them under his employ, and had plainclothes security on patrol. You'd have to pass 2 armed men to even get in. So welcoming. Ha. So, this reminded me of the time my dad disowned me. This happened a few times during my childhood. My dad thinks it's funny. I like to bake, and I had gotten some sourdough starter, liquid live yeast culture spewing CO2, from my lovely southern pseudo-grandma. She had put it in a glass mason jar sealed with a lid which I had put in my family fridge door. Unbeknownst to me, that jar had some micro-fractures in the glass, probably caused by rattling against other jars when the fridge door was opened. All this time the jar was getting more and more pressurized by CO2 yeast farts. Eventually, about a week later, my dad comes in from gardening, his hobby, and goes to the fridge for a beer. It's July in South Carolina, it's hot. Dad, a white-collar academic, but grew up as a farm kid, is overheated, has just cleaned up from his dirty gardening clothes. All he wants is a taste of that cool, hoppy, liquid joy. He yanks the fridge door open and my sourdough starter jar that had gamely been holding back a flood like me the last time I ate Taco Bell on a road trip, lost its battle with internal pressure and detonated like a glass grenade. My dad was covered in glass shards and goopy yeast. It's been 10 years and he still reminds me that I'm cut out of the will. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your kind words. I'm glad I finally was able to share this story. The whole situation felt wrong. It was disheartening because Mixer and I were really good coworker friends before all this went down. When he got his much-desired promotion, he was allowed to interview and bring on his own team, so he hired a bunch of his buddies from high school, and they followed him around like a pack of hyenas, Lord of the Flies style. He felt really threatened by me and encouraged his friends to be as passive-aggressive mean to me as possible. There were other people in the business that were also doing the same thing, doing whatever it took to try to land a comfortable and high-paying position at this new grocery store concept, and refused to see the writing on the wall. Good for you coming out of that situation better off than the Mixer. However, I would like to point out that most people who are putting up with sexual, or any type of harassment for that matter, aren't doing it to get ahead. Most are too afraid to rock the boat because they need their job. I'm not saying that you think we're okay with the abuse. Just a teaching moment. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.